welcome to the show.
Hey, Vic, how are you, man? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing awesome, brother. I'm excited to have you here. I think we're going to have an amazing conversation that is much more needed in the world, and especially for people, especially the day and age we're living, and it's just not pressed enough, as you already know. Before we get into that good stuff, I wanted to know, just to share with the listeners, how did you get into what you're doing today? What motivated you or inspired you to go this path?
Well, in case anyone's not exactly aware what I'm doing, I really am essentially like, I guess, personal finance guru and kind of authority blogger, and also coach people and getting their financial act together. And it happened because it was something that I was interested in. I was always interested in personal finance, owning a business, those sorts of things. I was always interested in real estate. These are all luckily just good hobbies and interests to have. They pay dividends. But previous to doing this, I owned my own business with some partners in Los Angeles. It was a post-production company. And it was pretty successful. And ultimately, really, I just got kind of burnt out, I guess. And we had our son, and it turns out that kids are like a lot of work, I guess. I didn't really know that. Well, I think I knew it a little bit, but maybe not to the degree that it turned out to be true. And my wife and I just decided to kind of blow up our lives and like try to like think about doing it differently and create more family time, because we were both working full time in Los Angeles, which was great before the kid, and we loved that. But it just was really competing, with the family life thing. And luckily, all the financial planning and personal finance interest and real estate investing all kind of paid off, and it put us in a position to make that kind of change. But we did end up what I call retreating to cheaper ground, which was we moved from Los Angeles to Florida. So we live on the west coast of Florida on the Gulf, which is great. And it's funny, like when I was owning the business, I had many assistants. I sort of mentored a lot of young people, and, they would always see me or hear me talking about real estate on the phone, because as a business owner, you can do other things, not just, the job you're hired to do, which is really critical, I think. And, my friends would ask me, or my assistants and coworkers would be like, "Oh, what's going on? What are you doing in real estate? Blah, blah." And then I tell them about personal finance. And, I sort of interweaved that into my sort of mentoring. Some of them grabbed onto it more than others, but oftentimes they would say, "You should teach a class at the community college," or something like that. And that always actually sounded like kind of a fun idea. And then, cut to now. Well, the class is online. You do it through your blog or through online courses and whatever, of course, which I have some on the topics. And that just was like the natural segue. I was like, I thought about it, like maybe someday, I will do that. And then the time came, and that's what I'm doing. Along with also, though, what it turns out is that, I look at personal finance and managing your money. It just like any hobby. Some people are interested in exercise, and that's a great hobby to be interested. That's very helpful. Some people are interested in Sea-Doos or whatever, and that's not so good on the personal finance front, but fun. But being interested in personal finance, does pay dividends, but not everyone's into it. So if you're not into it, and a lot of people are not, I'm noticing that it's just hard for people to get into it. It's like getting to the gym or whatever, and it does take time. So it's like, people are busy. So a lot of people just started saying, "Hey, will you do it for me?" So I do also just kind of do it for both businesses and individuals as like a fractional CFO and kind of personal business manager of some like higher income individuals and so on. So I kind of do it on like a broad spectrum now.
I love that. And, a lot of my work on money is a huge, and same for you. It's a huge emotional attachment, people have. Like Matthew McConaughey, he was talking one time, and he was talking about how he went back to Louisiana to see his roots in New Orleans. And he was going into a voodoo shop, and he goes, "This happens all the time." He goes in there and they have all these potions, emotions, and things for all these things you can have, like love and all this. And he goes, "There's one for money." And he goes, "I always see that one being empty. It's always an empty shelf." He goes, "There's some here for pregnant, fertility and this and that." He goes, "But they're not empty." He goes, "The one for money always is."
The money one is always sold out, basically.
Always sold out. It's basically a high demand, in other words, right? But yet in your experience in what you do, how much do people actually take time to get their personal finances in order to where it can pay dividends for them, not just now, but more importantly into the future, in the future?
I would say a very small percentage, to be honest with you. And I mean, also, I guess I should say that the people who do have it as their hobby and are into it, like myself, they're probably doing it for themselves and they're not probably hitting me up. Though some of them actually do just because they want to compare notes and make sure that they're covering all the bases. But I think it's in the majority of people are not really doing it. And some of it's because they just don't have the time. They make good money. Like all my clients make money, but they just don't have the time. They're very busy. Other people, I think, are scared to do it because, they're scared of finding out like what the results are going to be, which is reasonable, but that's no good reason to not do it. But yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people do. And I think also a lot of people kind of hit me up. They'll be in their 40s really. And they're kind of like, they have a couple kids and they're getting tired, you get tired of working and the kids kind of get you tired and they're like, God, I'm worried that I haven't paid enough attention to this and that I'm not going to be prepared. So luckily they're calling, but usually the answer to that, inquiry is sort of, yeah, you're right. You haven't paid enough attention to it, but it's never too late. I mean, the sooner you get started, the better, and then I always say this: you should encourage your kids when they come to the high school age, get them into it ASAP, because it's actually exciting. And I look at it as running the business of you. It's like your whole life. It's like you're setting out as a young person in your career. You want to make the most of your life. You want to have, ultimately, I think the most important thing about having money is like having options to do different things that you want to do when you want to do it. So like this, the sooner you see that as like a fun challenge and a fun ride to be on, the better. And doing your bookkeeping and sort of figuring out where you are with money in your life and where you're headed and have a plan and all that, just I think gives you confidence. I think it reduces anxiety and stress, which is good for your longevity. And gets you in a good mindset to make better maneuvers and get further ahead faster, I think.
No, I love that. I love how you bring it up for teenagers, because I think when it comes to personal finances, I think there's only like 4 states that actually teach that. And I think Florida just became a state that you can't graduate high school. You have to go through, I don't know if it's a personal finance class or I don't know what the details are of the class. Or
I noticed that. I think I got an email about that, and I was kind of proud of Florida for that.
Yeah, I was very happy to see that. I'm like, finally, we're getting back to what really matters and what we really need to learn, rather than, not saying algebra and trigonometry and all that fun stuff is great, but I had to take trig and calculus and all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I don't use that in my life ever. I
do use algebra though. I do use algebra all the time in Excel. If you get into spreadsheets, you are using algebra, as it turns out, in spreadsheets, and I'm always like, wow, this actually is incredibly helpful.
It is, right? I know. I love using Excel.
Geometry and trigonometry, calculus, not so much.
I had to use, I love doing woodworking a little bit. So I'm kind of thankful for some of the geometry I learned. Cause like when I got to make an angle and I'm like, what do I cut this angle? If I do it here, but then what's the length of measure? And I'm like, oh yeah, Pythagoras' theorem. Yeah. Let me put that together. And then I'm like, there it is. I figured it out. So, but yeah.
Woodworking and spreadsheets.
Yeah, there we go. Right. I think it's critical. And you brought up another point too. It's always sooner is always better than later. That's why I love health and wealth, because they go hand in hand, right? The earlier you focus on your health, the more longevity you have. You can start later, but there's going to be conditions and some points of no return. So it's just, we have to manage a lot more when it comes to that point. What are some things that people can, basic tips or tools that they can start to do today, or advice that they can start looking at it? Because I know you brought up some things about like sometimes they just don't have the time. So I'm assuming personal finances, there's a time component that comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everything takes time. Like if you exercise, that takes time, whatever. But it's as I said before, I call it the business of you. So like, you could try to figure out how to make it like the most or the least time consuming thing ever and spend 1 minute a week on it. And, you're probably going to get the commensurate benefit of that. I think, you can do it once you kind of get going, get set up maybe an hour every couple of weeks you spend kind of looking at it. But ultimately, the linchpin is doing bookkeeping, I think, for your life, using some sort of computer software, whether that be like web-based or even on your computer. Like I use Quicken, for example, but there's tons of things. And, tracking your spending, you're tracking your income and expenses, and essentially knowing that you make more money than you spend in a given month, because that ultimately is your savings. Like no matter, I'm not a big fan of like all the different budgeting systems. Like I know people need to sort of be like, entertained, I guess. And I appreciate that. But, I'm more like just kind of stick to the basics, I guess. But at the end of the day, no matter what your budgeting system is, no matter how much you're putting in your 401k, whatever, if you don't make more than if you spend more than you make, you're not saving money. It doesn't matter if you've routed, money to an account or this or that or the other. Like you really need to know that you're having a net profit every month and every year. That's your true savings. And the only way to know that is to actually keep track of it. So and then, there is like the whole budgeting concept of it. But I always say to people, you can't really make an accurate budget until you know kind of roughly how much your life costs, and you only know that if you do a little bit of tracking. So that's a lot, honestly, where I lose some people. They're just like, oh man, it just, it sounds like a hassle and whatever. And I'm like, I like it. I kind of find it cathartic, but not everybody does. And if you choose not to do it, obviously this is America, you can do whatever you want, but you will suffer the consequences eventually. So if, you don't mind getting fat and dying early, don't ever worry about exercise and eat as much as you want. So it's fine. You can do that. But so I'm a little bit of a hard ass coach, I guess. Just don't have time for like spoon feeding it. It's pretty basic. Just get to it, but I don't even know if I'm making it sound that exciting, but that's it. It's like, pay attention, do some bookkeeping, make sure you're making more than you're spending, and then constantly tighten it up and shore it up and try to improve things. And a lot of times what this leads to is, hey, I need to make more money, and really that's the part that you can be, kind of go on offense and be proactive about. Like, hey, should I ask for a raise at work? Hey, like, should I do that side business? Hey, maybe I should convert, and get out of work in W-2 and actually start a business, where I'll have more potential income and more control over my time. Like to me, it's motivational to see the results and say, okay, now I know what I need to do. So, and that's always been the case for me. So I try to encourage people, to look at that as a positive and look at this whole process as a motivational process. And I think I succeed in some cases on that for sure, but some people are just like, I don't feel like it, so I'm going to wing it.
Yeah, no, totally. Are you a fan then of like, I mean, it sounds like you are with like using Quicken or something like that, because it does this already in a sense, but like setting budgets to certain things.
Yeah, I mean, so like I have a budget, and all this is like on my website, either in a free form if you want to dig through, or I have like a paid course that literally walks you through exactly what you need to do. I give you the budget. I give you like a retirement planning spreadsheet so you can see how much money you need to save and over how much time and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's a way to start, because it just reduces a whole bunch of like guesswork. You just sort of like buy this little course and it walks you through it and kind of gets you set up. But yeah, you do some tracking, and then eventually you kind of say, okay, this is what I make. This is roughly what my life is costing. Am I doing okay? Am I saving enough? And if not, there's two ways to improve that. There's spend less, make more. Spending less isn't always that easy. There's a lot of like low hanging fruit there. There's no question about it. But you can only like sort of reduce your spending, so much benefit. You know what I mean? Like eventually you really got to go on offense. I always say the best defense is a good offense. And you got to focus on, your income and making sure that's really where it needs to be. And I also am not a fan of like living, super frugally, frankly. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit of the FIRE movement type person, because I sort of semi-retired early, but I don't want to live on $20,000 a year. I mean, that just doesn't sound like any fun to me. what can I say? So I want to make sure, I guess I'm fat fire. I guess I want to make sure I have enough money to like do what I want, have fun, but not be stressed, every time like I, buy something or go somewhere,
It's a good way to live, not having to worry about it. You can just do what you want and it's all taken care of. I like
Honestly,
that.
that's the best part of like getting ahead of this stuff is like, you don't have to worry so much about money if you figure it out. Now, I'm not saying that it's like, doing a budget and tracking your finances is going to solve all your financial problems. It's not. I mean, ultimately income solves your financial problems, or hitting the lottery, that's a win too. But most likely it's going to come from your income. But, if you take it seriously and get ahead of it, like it just makes your life so much more pleasant. It's just, I say to people, and like money can't buy you happiness, but it can make the road there much less bumpy. That's pretty much my philosophy about it.
No, it's true. I mean, once, you get those needs met, then from there, it's like, okay, now there's more opportunities to do things and enjoy more and have those opportunities with that. When it comes to looking in the long term, I'm assuming this is individual because each individual has different demand. Like you're like, I like to have just be able, when I get the older I get, I want to be able to spend and not have to think about it. Whereas, is there like looking at numbers to what, like, I remember when I was in chiropractic school, someone said, "What's your number?" And I was like, "What do you mean?"
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, and I know you know where I'm going with this. And I was like,
Yep.
I know what you're talking about. And he's like, "What's your number? What number do you need to get to enjoy your life and have literally never have to worry about money again?" And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Crap, I don't know." And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I have to figure that out. Do you do kind of that work
Yeah.
for helping people?
Yeah. I mean, that I call it it's a course I call the Financial Independence Roadmap. And ultimately it is about figuring out what that number is. Now, that's a tricky question because it's like that number could actually be pretty darn high. Like if you're just going to like have zero concern, live in America at like a high level, all that, and sort of follow the basic tenets of like retirement planning, that number could be kind of scary high and almost unachievable for the vast majority of Americans, unfortunately. So part of my process is, okay, like you think about what you want your life to be like within reason, and it's about also like where maybe do I want to live when I'm retired, or like what do I want to do. There's all sorts of options to get that number to be like a manageable number. And then it's kind of, I call it kind of like reverse engineering your retirement. Once you kind of have that rough idea, then you're like, okay, this is the age I'm at. This is what I got so far. And simple spreadsheet, really. That algebra that I mentioned earlier, it's all done in my spreadsheets that I give. Is like, how much do I need to save, and how much does that saving need to earn in terms of like an investment return in order for me to hit that number by a rough date, And again, it's like, this is like, we don't know exactly how long we're going to live, all sorts of stuff. So it's not a perfect science, but it's just like having this rough plan that gets you to a number, that basically, is going to give you the options you want, and I think a lot of times too, like for young people, 20s and 30s, it's like, retirement's kind of a sleepy topic. I like to call it financial independence because it's more exciting, and it's financial independence is something that maybe you're doing more earlier in your life, kind of like me, versus retirement. You always think of like 65, 70 or whatever. But, we're all headed to retirement, whether you think you are or not. Like, I don't care like how long you think you're going to be working, you will probably get tired. You might get aged out. You might get physically like, moved out of work, whatever. Eventually you will be stuck with kind of like what you achieved and like having that last, hopefully a long time or as long as you needed to. So you just don't want to leave it up to chance. You got to put a little bit of effort and thought into it. And hopefully by doing that, you will master it, and then you will be in full control. And not, as I say, living in a double wide, like next to the highway. You know what I mean? Which, if I live in Florida, so I see a lot of those. And I'm always like, I wonder if they didn't put enough time to their retirement planning. I think it's quite possible, but I'm not judging.
That's funny. And so let's talk then too, because we talked about savings, and then what are some, like, and I know this is hard, it's different for each individual and stuff too, but what are some common investing tools that people can use to kind of help themselves, get to that, allow them to get more of that financial independence? Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to the investing component, and by the way, I I kind of, I guess not lump, but I organize all this stuff into what I call 3 pillars. One of my slogans is you have to be financially imprudent, business minded, and investing focused. And it's like financially prudent is like doing the personal finance sort of stuff, minding your money, all that. Business minded is sort of being entrepreneurial, being focused and worried about your income and trying to, master that. And then the investing focus is realizing that I'm never going to save enough just from my income alone. Most likely, I need to grow my savings through investing. And it's a whole world. The whole financial, industry, services industry exists to solve this problem for people. But it really also ultimately does come down to like, I need to get a certain return on my money, like on average, in order to reach my goal. And you can kind of figure out what that amount would be. You could say, hey, I need to get 100% a year. Well, that's just not going to happen. What can you roughly expect? And I think the financial services industry, will pat themselves on the back if they get you a 7% compound annual return. But I think without owning your own real estate, you could probably but doing like real estate syndications or stock market investing or whatever, hope to get between a 7 and 15% return compound annual, and that's averaged over many years. But you have to work at that, and I think real estate probably delivers better returns with less risk, frankly, than just the general stock market. But if it depends who, what your, I guess, comfort level is and so on. But most people in my writings, you'll see that they're either going to be invested in the public markets, the stock market, or have some mix of stocks and bonds, which would sort of be the Boglehead sort of philosophy. Or they're going to do personally owned real estate or real estate syndications. Like I did a lot of, owning single family rentals. For my business, we bought 2 commercial buildings. I basically said, and then I should say, actually, what I generally recommend, though, as the number one thing people should do in most cases is buy their own home. I think that is like the best number one investment you can make, because you're spending money on rent anyway. So you can sort of parlay that into an investment. And owning your own home, at least for now, the U.S. government wants to incentivize that, so they give us very large tax breaks for owning the real estate that we live in. So I think that's one of the best and easiest real estate investments you can do, and I think it generally ends up being most people's retirement fund, and that should be where people start. Now, I've done the math on renting versus owning. You can find it on my website. It generally, I would say by and large, the math is for owning. Though there are some markets like New York, like if you happen to live in a rent-controlled apartment in New York and you're paying $2,000 a month, and the equivalent unit to buy would be $1.5 million. Well, the math on that actually would tell you that you shouldn't buy. You should stay in the rent-controlled apartment and just invest all the money you would have otherwise put into buying the house. But that's kind of the rare scenario. I think most places in America, even today, your best bet is to buy your own house. And unfortunately, it's tough because the real estate market is usually at the high at any given time. So it's always hard, I think, for some people who are about real estate to be like, "Oh, I'm buying at the top of the market," But most of the time it is at the top of the market. There's not much you can do. So buy your own house, then you're going to look probably at stock market investments and or potentially real estate syndication type stuff if you want to do real estate without like buying your own properties. And then after that, you could look into buying your own real estate, single family rentals, multifamily rentals. If you get really into it, bigger multi-unit apartment buildings. Real estate for me has been our main investment performer. So I'm a fan of it, and I talk a lot about it on my website. But it takes work. So that's the downside of real estate. It's not as passive, I don't think, as everyone seems to indicate it is online.
No, I can agree. I mean,
real estate syndications are passive. I will say that.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And that's a great way to give the big picture on it all, because it's always one of those things where you're not going to be able to hit those marks just saving your money. You have to put it in something to grow in some way, shape, or form. And I love the 7 to 15% returns. That's compounding that. Whew, that's some
Yeah.
good money 20 years down
I
the
mean,
road.
it's, you know, getting to the 15 part, you got to do your homework. You know, if you just hand your money over to Wall Street, which is not necessarily a bad thing to do, and some people that's all they can do. I think you're probably gonna be looking more on the long term on the lower side of that. You know, the more effort, the more potential return you get, but you got to do it. I mean, and the funny thing is, a lot of people that do call me, as I mentioned before, like in their 40s, they've saved money. A lot of times, though, it's sitting in a savings account because they're a bit paralyzed about investing it, which I understand. You save money, you don't want to lose it. I hate losing any money that's invested. It makes me sick to my stomach. So it can be hard to do. But just letting your savings sit in a savings account is not going to do you any favors, unfortunately. You do have to go out and take some of the investing risk.
And I'm very much like you. I love real estate. I've done a couple in the last few years. Like we bought when I was in Chicago, when I bought my first house, it was an investment house. Like I was like, we're going to treat this like an investment. But we lived there for 4 or 5 years. But and I'm glad we did that because it paid off. Market was just coming on the up when we did that. You living in Florida is actually a beautiful thing right now. I must say, I'm in Tennessee. It's a beautiful thing right now.
Yeah, we definitely got lucky. We got to Florida 2018 and bought a few properties, bought 3, and I'm glad we did. We sold one already, and kind of capitalized on the improvements. But yeah, Florida, especially our area, really took off. Though I will say, if I had stayed in California, California did amazing too. So, but it probably netted out to be the same. Luckily. But yeah, it's I treat all my residences as investments, and honestly, I think one of the the easiest things people can do is kind of looking at their houses as an investment, like I call it the live and flip. It's like you buy a house that needs some work in your younger years. It's a starter house. You work on it. You fix it up. You either be the general contractor, you do some work yourself, whatever. You make improvements, and then you sell it. And if you're there for 2 years, at least, you get up to $250,000 as a single person or $500,000 as a married couple of free capital gains. So if you were to do that every 4 years, that alone is a great real estate investment strategy. And it's probably one of the most lucrative, best tax advantaged ones outside of getting into large multifamily or something like that. But that doesn't always fit into everybody's lifestyle or whatever. But that's just like, I think, the easiest, simplest things to do. And you're investing in real estate, and you're getting great tax breaks, and you're taking your rent and turning it into something. And then also the other thing about owning a house is there's an emotional benefit to owning a house, in my opinion. It's like you can't be kicked out. Your rent can't be raised outside of like your taxes going up. You have pride in your property. You can do improvements and things you want to do, and you're going to reap the benefit of this thing. There's just so many things, that are beneficial to owning your own house. So obviously this conversation is a little bit geared towards younger people who might be just thinking about that or on the fence. But yeah.
I appreciate that. Joe, how can people find you, follow you, see what you're up to, your courses and all that good stuff?
Yeah, just my website. It's playlouder.com. My slogan is work smarter, plan better, play louder. And on there, you could get all my information for free if you want to read all my articles. If you want more, focused, curated version of the information, I have 3 courses on there. One's called the Financial Independence Roadmap. It's all about doing this planning that we were talking about. One is called Incorporate and Manage Your Business. So if you're doing a side hustle or whatever, or you're an independent contractor, there are benefits to incorporating and that sort of stuff. So I have a little course about that. And then one about managing and understanding how to make money in real estate, and real estate investing profits. So that's the best place. I don't really do social media because I think it's poison. Though I do post stuff on social media, but it's a plugin on my website that automatically does it. So I'm totally cheating. But maybe LinkedIn is the place I'd probably respond to stuff the most.
Awesome, brother. Well, I want to thank you for taking time to spend some time with us here at the Mindful Experiment and share how to level up with our personal finances. I think there's never enough information and learning and just constantly giving reminders to really take action on this, because the sooner we do this, the more you can reap the benefits later down the road. And the sooner, the bigger the pot of what you'll have too. So appreciate you, brother.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.